let's welcome to the stage Nicole, Umayam, Aaron, Schill, and Carson Block. Where they at? The squad. Digital Equity Dream Team. Now, like I was saying earlier, I mean, this is coming from the digital equity guy, that's what I do, but I really think, we would all benefit from reframing our thinking a little bit around digital equity, and all of the work that you do is a part of granting access to those communities in need. We're all here to serve our members and to make sure that those who don't have access gain access. So, and this is all a part of digital equity. This panel is about digital equity planning, because we can't take effective action without a really good plan. And so we put together a stellar panel to talk about digital equity planning. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. We have Aaron Schill in the center here. Fun fact about Aaron, he's with the NTTA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, not the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We got a little, you know what? Hold on real quick. There we go. Aaron Schill, Director of Research and Programs at National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Fun fact about Aaron, he is left-handed. That's it. No, that's not it. He's left-handed for some things like writing and eating, the essential functions for staying alive, but he's right-handed for other things like playing sports, but he can't do either thing ambidextrously. And yeah. Let's welcome Aaron Schill to the panel. Thank you. On the left here, we've got, man, you guys should have sat in the order of your photos, because now Okay, yeah, this is the first order for the mirror. Okay. On stage right over here, your house left, is Carson Block. Fun fact about Carson is he plays guitar in an active band. He wanted me to make sure that it was an active band, nothing retired about it, called Cool Hand Juke. And they're performing this evening, I think, for NTTA. No, I'm just kidding. Cool Hand Juke. Let's welcome Carson. And to your right is Nicole Umayam, who does work for the NTIA. She's a federal program officer, and she's based here in Phoenix. Fun fact about Nicole, she is a twin. She's the older of two, and her sister is in Geneva studying for her PhD. So, look at you. All right, let's welcome Nicole. Thank you. All right, let's get started. Sorry about this. Okay, so just to do some brief context setting, Carson, can you tell us a little bit about what a digital equity plan is, and why those here today should consider creating one or participating in the creation of one in their communities?
Yes, a digital equity plan is really the why we're doing all this work, right? There's such a focus on the technology builds, and those are essential and crucial, and they need to get there. When it's built, what happens next? And that is what the digital equity plan is all about. And one of the ways that I thought would be it was just like so powerful yesterday, the last session, Dr. James Trumbull talked about what the Osage chief has said with these different projects that the Osages are doing with different digital equity and different enhancements to making technology work for them. And the quote is, his vision is to connect ancestors with descendants. That's powerful, right? That's a powerful use of technology, and having a focus with that sort of focus really helps bring together powerful ways to make that a reality. And when we're looking at digital equity planning, and the reason it's important is it's really easy to just think it's just about the technology. The internet access, that is definitely part of it, right? Devices to use the internet and to access the web and other digital resources. Those are also important. But the knowledge and skills to change all of our lives in our community powerfully, the knowledge to use these tools is really what digital equity is all about. Again, it's our why to create prosperous, thriving communities.
It's our why, but I like to also add that we take a strategic approach to supporting our communities through digital equity. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, because it doesn't just happen, right? So part of this is through if anyone's been involved in any sort of planning before, and not everybody has, right? If anyone's been involved in planning, a big part of this is assessing where the needs are, looking at where the gaps are, and where you don't have gaps, actually things to build upon, and making decisions about where to emphasize your efforts to improve things.
Thank you, Carson. So if you're sitting there thinking, all right, digital equity plan sounds like a good idea, but I'm not really sure how to go about it. The NTTA has created a toolkit. It was built for states, but it can be adapted for tribal use. That's something that we are doing at DCI, is trying to take that toolkit and adapt it. So Aaron, I'd like to invite you to talk a little bit about the NTTA Digital Equity Plan Toolkit, which you helped co-write. And what should people know about writing their own digital equity plan?
Good questions. I'll start. We have a state toolkit, as Mikhail mentioned. It was built kind of around to help states prepare for and then participate in the Digital Equity Act planning process. Every state and territory is in the process of developing plans now. But there are also over 400, I think, tribal applicants for those planning funds also. And so we are about to begin a process of developing an Indigenous communities planning toolkit also. Stay tuned for that. There will be opportunities to work with us on that. But in the meantime, this toolkit is out there and ready for use. And a lot of the kind of the technical things, the things we say you should do this, and then this, and then this, and kind of like walk through. So whether that's doing data collection and needs assessment, whether that's developing asset mapping, a lot of those kind of technical pieces are going to be consistent, whether you're at a state level, whether you're in a tribal community, regardless of where you are, you're going to do a lot of the same steps. So this is really useful. And there's step-by-step guides, there's worksheets, there's a lot of, there's survey templates, there's a lot of great resources. So I would suggest take a look at that and see how that can be helpful. But thinking more about like, how do you do this? How do you approach this in your community? So the first thing I would say is, I know that a lot of the discussion the last few days has been around infrastructure development and infrastructure planning. If you are not thinking about digital equity planning along with that, you need to be. So the first step for doing it for your community is start talking to people and start thinking about how you integrate digital equity. So what we mean by that is providing digital skill programming, figuring out how people are going to have access to devices, providing ongoing technical support. All of that needs to be integrated into infrastructure build out. So the first piece is just start planning for it and begin thinking about it. The second piece is figure out how do you make it reflect your individual community. So we provide this toolkit, but it's not a formula. So every digital equity plan needs to be tailored to and reflect both the needs and the values of your individual community. So none of them are going to look the same. And this is something we harp on with every state we talk to, with every local community we talk to, that this really needs to reflect your community. So Carson mentioned one of the key pieces is doing like needs assessment and understanding what needs exist. An equally important piece is understanding what the goals and values and ultimately where people want to go in the community. Like, why are they using technology? Older adults, folks that need support are not using technology because they're a disconnected individual, or they're not using technology because, or they're not looking for support because they have some deficiency. They want to be able to talk to their grandkids, or they want to be able to get a new job. So the other thing that I would say is the most important is think about this not just from the perspective of needs and gaps and problems to fix, but what are the goals and aspirations of folks in the community, and then thinking about what resources exist in the community now that you can leverage and bring into the conversation and support to help achieve those. So the last conversation up here was around like workforce development. And I think, Mikhail, you mentioned that that's about capacity building. So digital equity planning is also about capacity building. So you have a lot of work going on in your communities now that you may not even know about. There are a lot of people doing digital equity work that don't think about it. So there are social workers who are helping people get signed up for benefits. There's teachers that are helping families connect to do online schooling. This is all digital equity work. They just don't call it that because they've got a million other things to be doing. So the other key step that I would say is start talking to people, start understanding what your local digital equity ecosystem looks like. And if that's a new term to you, we describe it in the toolkit, so take a look. But understand what your ecosystem looks like and understand how you can leverage that and begin to build support for your community and help people get where they want to go.
Yeah, doctors and nurses too. I mean, they do digital equity work by helping people get connected online and encouraging telehealth programs. So thank you, Aaron. That's great. I wrote down what you said because, as we at Gila River start to develop our own digital equity plan, I want to make sure we're also taking into consideration our community's aspirations. What are their hopes and dreams, and how can we help them get there? So we've talked a little bit about what a digital equity plan is, and we have a toolkit that tells us how we can do it, gives us at least a framework or a model. Nicole, how can we fund some of this work? What are some of the opportunities to participate in state digital equity plans? Because we've got BEAD and the Digital Equity Act, which also provides funding through competitive grants or any of the other grants that are available. And what are some of the essential items that our audience should know, that resources that you can point them to?
Great. So in addition to some of the great resources that we've mentioned, I don't want to bury my lead, and I actually want to give you the takeaway right now, which is to get over to the Internet for All website. Thanks, Mikhail. And this is where you get the contact information of your state broadband office. If you haven't been engaging with them, their contact information is listed here, as well as the federal program officer for the state or territory that you're in. So we've got Arizona's highlighted in our example here. That front page has a tab up for map that will take you to this nice diagram, and you can select your respective state or territory. You get a sample timeline for both BEAD and DE. You can check with states for confirming that. You can see some additional details, which includes the program office. You can see in some tiny writing for me, our contact information. So if you get one thing out of this, that's what I'd like you to check first when you go home is, the email and phone number of those people who are coordinating all of that work at the state level. Before I worked with NTIA, I was involved in digital inclusion, and we would have our broadband conversations, and we'd have our digital inclusion conversations, and they were always kept separate. And the exciting part about this this point in time and this historic amount of funding is that those conversations are in legislation happening simultaneously, and that they're coordinated. I really appreciate how Dr. Tracy Morris framed it earlier today, that these broadband discussions are actually all under digital equity. And that's a useful reframing for thinking about how we're writing these plans, how we're setting that vision. It's about the infrastructure and the people. And Mikhail, you share that sentiment as well as a strong leader in this space. States have received their planning funds for 2 of these infrastructure programs. So that's the BEAD Act as well as the Digital Equity Act. BEAD is a $42.45 billion formula grant that goes to states and territories. How tribes are able to access that money is through a sub-grant that the state creates. And they have a few different major deliverables that they have to achieve as a part of this program. And they are, in fact, required to involve tribes every step of the way. And so I just want to illustrate for this group what that looks like. So one of the first deliverables is that the states have 1 year to write their 5-year broadband plan, their strategic plan for how they see at a high level broadband being rolled out to every single household in those areas. In that plan, they have to demonstrate how they're going to collaborate with local, regional, and tribal entities, and they have to describe in pretty good detail what those external engagements look like. After that, they have to write their initial proposal, which is the nitty-gritty about locations that they intend to serve, certain areas that are up for bid, what that sub-grant process looks like. And they have to, again, identify their steps that the state has been taking to support local and tribal broadband planning in that process. And they have to describe that coordination. The fun part is also that they have to certify that they have coordinated with all of these different stakeholder groups, localities, and tribal nations. For BEAD in statute, there is a formal tribal consultation process that is required as well. And so in those discussions, that's where your leadership should come prepared, coming to the table with a sense of what those broadband infrastructure needs are, how your tribe has been collaborating with ISPs in the past, or some of those relationship dynamics. Your insights about digital equity needs in your community, as well as workforce and digital skills that are needed for the future. So making sure that your leadership is aware and is ready for those conversations. I really like that how earlier Kimball Sekeptua, I don't see her, but she mentioned that you don't need to wait for the states to write the rules. We can start that organization already. You can do that, engage in that planning. You can, start calling your broadband office right away. You really do not need to, let them set the pace for you, because you know what's best for your communities. Finally, for BEAD, for all the proposed areas that states are intending to serve, they are required to get a letter of consent from tribal governments for each proposed deployment on tribal lands. So that's another thing to consider. I know sometimes those internal processes and procedures can be quite lengthy. So being sure that leadership and other leaders are aware of what's going to be involved, and that this is a discussion that they can bring in the state's own planning. The Digital Equity Act is the other infrastructure plan, and that planning funding has been awarded to all states and territories now. They have a bit of a shorter timeline. They have 1 year to come up with the state's digital equity plan, and that is working in coordination. It's supposed to be complementary and integrated with the state's BEAD processes. So that means that they'll have coordinated project meetings. It means that their consultation or their engagement with tribes might cover both elements, because they're trying to think about it as all part of the same problem that they're reaching. The states have, there was a formula grant going to states and territories that was a $60 million formula grant. There's an additional $1.44 billion, which is called the State Capacity Grant for Digital Inclusion. So that's where states get to then implement the amazing programs that they've spent the past year planning. And then there is a $1.25 billion competitive grant. And that is what is available to tribes directly to apply for. It's available for other state agencies, for localities, for nonprofits, workforce entities are all going to be eligible to apply for that same competitive grant. So regardless of where you're looking for funding, starting that planning process early, getting involved in the state, regional, statewide conversation about what those needs are it's really a critical time now. I know we're taking up some time, but in the state's actual plan, if you want to start thinking about what things you'd like to highlight, they need to identify broad barriers to digital equity and some of those priorities for all of these different community members. I can remember, 6 or 8 months ago when we had NTTA here last time, where the Gila River Lieutenant Governor mentioned that broadband connectivity is critical to survival for supporting our sisters and our missing and murdered Indigenous women and people. And if we know that these are our priorities close to our heart, that we can emphasize those in these other discussions. States also need to document their objectives for how they're going to promote adoption. So whether this is things like the Affordable Connectivity Program or how they're approaching different vendors, things, even setting standards of service. There's a lot of flexibilities in how they're writing their subgrant plans. States will also assess how the impact of these different programs are going to interplay with their state's workforce goals, with the state's homeland security goals, education goals as well, economic and workforce goals. They're also required to list all of the organizations that they have collaborated with in the process of writing both of these plans. And guess what? NTIA gets to verify that they indeed did meet with all of these groups. And so if we get a list that says, hey, we met with all of these tribes, and NTIA checks, and you say that's not how it, that's not really how it went down, then we have a lot of questions that need to be answered in their final proposal. Broadly, those states, it is a planning document, so they'll be outlining what that vision is for digital equity. And so if there's already some strong statements that you have there, how can we incorporate that into the state's broader plans that is going to get codified for this program?
Thank you, Nicole. So just to reiterate a couple of those points, I really like what you said about we don't have to wait for the state to approach us. That's a part of exercising our sovereignty and securing our cyber sovereignty, is to take the initiative and reach out to the state and say, hey, how are you considering tribes in this thing that you're doing? Because we want to be involved. The other is, taking the initiative, go to internetforall.gov and learn about these programs. We've got digital equity and we've got BEAD. Digital equity, the plan that is created by the state will be wrapped up into the BEAD 5-year action plan that states are required to submit, at least the draft version of it. And so, for us here in Arizona, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're a part of the state of Arizona's broadband plan, digital equity plan. So thank you, Nicole. One last point, Carson, what are some of the challenges that tribes might run into that would be good for them to know ahead of time as they enter the digital equity plan creation process?
Absolutely. You've heard this over and over and over the past 2 days. There's not much time to do everything. So I think that's probably the biggest overriding challenge, is that everyone's being asked to do so much at the same time, and everyone is this work though is going to be worth it. As also we've been hearing quite frequently, this is a rare time in our history. I've been working in library technology for a very long time, since the web was a little baby. I've never seen this much energy on something so geeky. Usually it's like, oh, it's flashing lights and it's the internet and who cares. In this case, it's not just flashing lights or this amorphous idea of the internet. It is the impacts that having a level playing field, having access to digital resources in our digital economy, our digital learning, and contributing to that and taking back from it as well, is finally recognized as being important. So this is a really key time. But the challenges for doing a digital equity plan is a lot of this involves talking to people. And that takes a lot of time. And the nice thing about the toolkit is it gives this beautifully structured way to approach these conversations. But the conversations can't be, you can't say, well, I had a conversation and it doesn't reflect in the plan. It is so important to have the conversations, and that everyone that you've communicated with in your community, that they see their thoughts, they see that their desires and aspirations are part of the fabric of that plan. It's not hard to do. It just takes that diligence of talking, thinking, and learning about it. The other, I think, is the idea of sustainability, that's come up as well in a technical sense. As a technician, I can tell you that IT replacement schedules are really rare and they're essential. You know, I've talked to city managers who said, well, we bought that equipment 10 years ago. Why do we need another router? It's like, well, because your router's dead. They don't last for more than a certain amount of time. It's the same thing with our engagement, because what we want to do is make sure that this is something that's permanent, this connection to our communities and meeting those, especially those gaps that start emerging. And sometimes the gaps are really simple, like the idea that many elders like being able to connect to family. That's one of their drivers to do this, or to share their memories, or to create powerful oral histories and things like that. Other younger people may be just trying to start their career, and maybe the career that they want to start is not something that's local. Maybe it's something that can help the access to digital resources can help connect them to a community, to learning, and to others that are far away. So, and everything in between. These changes are always happening, and so making it a permanent part of the work is really what makes this investment that we're having right now in this access really pay off for our communities and really be powerful.
Cool. I'd like to ask you, what can you tell us about the Toward Gigabit Libraries toolkit? That's something that you've mentioned to me in the past.
Yes.
I'd like you to share that with
It's yet another toolkit.
Yeah, so we got toolkits galore. I'll tell you what, go to internet2.edu.
Yes, and the Toward Gigabit Libraries toolkit, a lot of the energy that we have at the conference right now is really looking at our wide area connectivity and that last mile connectivity. The Towards Gigabit Library Toolkit was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services specifically to help small, rural and tribal libraries to self-diagnose the last 100 meters of their connection. The last 100 meters is all the stuff inside of your building. And while we haven't solved all of our connectivity problems that we need with broadband, I can tell you for a fact that inside our community centers, inside of our libraries, inside of any of our places where we have network services, sometimes that internal networks, they're in bad shape and they need a hand, and not everyone has the resources to even troubleshoot it. So the toolkit is a self-guided toolkit that is very simple. It's designed for a layperson to look at. It asks a series of questions around your technology, and then it provides the answer to that, and it results in a way to fix that in a long-term and a short-term way. It's all very friendly.
Awesome. Thank you, Carson. So I want to open the floor up to the audience. You've heard a lot from our panelists. What is a digital equity plan? How can we prepare for our community? What we've got, the NTTA has resources on how to create your plan, and we have a lot of funding opportunities available through working with our states. Are there any questions out there about digital equity? I get generally, I think.
Mikhail, while folks are thinking, can I suggest one other resource? It's not an NTTA resource per se, but I want to note our close partner and colleague, Davida Delmar with ACI, Ameren Critical Infrastructure, who organizes the Indigenous Digital Inclusion Working Group, which is a really fantastic way. She's over there, maybe if you want to raise your hand if you don't know Davida. Sorry for putting you on the spot. But if you are not engaged in that work right now, but want to understand what other communities are working on, that would be a really great way to do that. And we can help get you connected as a way to start that conversation and kind of understand how to dip your toe into the work and be able to take it on.
Yeah, everybody swarmed Davida at the end of the conference. She loves that kind of attention. So one last thing I want to note is in your agendas on page 1 or 2, I guess, whatever, is the QR code. Scan that QR code and you have access to all the presentations, including ours. We have clickable links for the Toward Gigabit Libraries Toolkit, the NTTA Digital Equity Plan Toolkit, and Internet for All. If there are no other questions, going once, going twice, any last words, bits of advice? Then let's thank our panelists. Thank you very much.